Welcome to the show, everyone. This is another edition of your voice of reason in a world that is Beyond Reason Radio, here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. We are on until 10 p.m. as usual, right here tonight on WFLA. Or if you miss any of the show, you can, of course, catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. We have a lot to get to on the show tonight. There's new information, as I'm sure you've all heard by now. And if you haven't heard, you must have been living under a rock or something, about the Trump dossier that resurfaced all the allegations about Trump in connections with Russia. Now we find out that it was basically paid for by the DNC and the Clinton campaign. Surprise, surprise. So there's been reaction to that as well out there. It's amazing how all of the Russia allegation stuff is turning around towards the Clintons. There's no smoking gun, so to speak, yet in terms of Clintons. Well, although the uranium thing is a big deal, I actually think that's a bigger story.
Absolutely.
So we'll get to that, because I think Hillary could be in a lot of trouble with that. We also have to talk about the Jeff Flake versus Trump controversy, I guess, what you call it. He made a big speech. And we'll play some of the speech, and we'll play some of the reaction to that as well. And I'll get my take on it. Let's just say it seems rather convenient to come out with that when he did. We'll see what happens to Jeff Flake after that. We also have a guest coming on in the next hour who's going to talk about Islamist supremacy. He says there's a lot of controversy dealing with Charlottesville and white supremacy, but nobody's focusing on Muslim or Islamist supremacy. So I was pitched this, and I thought it sounded pretty interesting, so we're going to talk to him in the next hour. Also have to talk about the Niger situation. People are saying it's Trump's Benghazi. Talk about why I don't think that's true. And then some other subjects as well. And, of course, we have Mr. Tom Benson, who is producing tonight. How are you, Tom?
I am fine, enjoying this change in the weather. This is pretty delightful, but I must admit, I got the long johns out for tonight. No
long johns.
No skivvies tonight.
Oh, jeez, Louise.
The air conditioners. The air conditioners turned off. The windows are open.
I mean, I get it's going to get in like the 50s, but I mean, we're in Long John territory in the Benson household, huh?
Hey, till I get used to it, I got to keep warm,
We're such Floridians.
Yes, we are.
We're going to have to get our coats out. It's 60 degrees, and we're like, it's too cold. I don't want to get out. So, but yeah, the weather is nice, I guess. So another thing that created a lot of controversy, a lot of news this week, was the New York Times came out with an article, a big explosive article over the weekend about Bill O'Reilly, talking about how he settled new harassment claim right before he renewed his contract, and it was for like $32 million. This has been a big story this week. I'm sure you've all heard about it. I just want to say this. Now, O'Reilly's denying a lot of this. He's not necessarily denying that there was a settlement, but he says this was a hit piece, which it pretty much was a hit piece. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But he's saying there's a lot of misinformation in it, that now he regrets settling. He's even angry at God for allowing all this to happen, yada, yada, yada. He was on Glenn Beck's show, which plays in our station, and talked about how, he's just being attacked and not, unrightfully so. But I this whole thing really sparked my attention, because for one, my first thought when this whole thing came out is it seems rather convenient for this story to come out now. Why did this come out now? Because the Bill O'Reilly thing was a story, a while ago. And then he was kicked off of Fox News, and that was the whole thing, and all that was exposed and everything else. Yeah. But all of a sudden, this news story comes out, and I'm like, this is very interesting. And then I found there was a headline on Mediaite, and this is what the headline says, and this got me thinking even more. It says, Harvey Weinstein and Bill O'Reilly are proxies in a media war between NBC and Fox News. And I'm like, huh. So this O'Reilly thing comes out now, conveniently right after the Harvey Weinstein stuff is happening, which is still happening, which, I mean, there must be, to catalog all of the allegations against Harvey Weinstein, you're going to need a book bigger than War and Peace,
That's
I guess.
right, yeah.
Because it just keeps coming and coming. It's just crazy.
Who was it, Jimmy Kimmel, who said, how did this guy find time to make movies?
That is a great question. I don't know. So Harvey, this whole thing of Harvey Weinstein comes out. It exposes Hollywood. It exposes the left. And yet, all of a sudden, the Bill O'Reilly thing comes out. And I'm thinking, this is real. Now, I'm not necessarily saying Bill O'Reilly's innocent. I don't know. Never met the guy. I don't have some kind of inside information that he's guilty or innocent. It seems to me when you're paying that amount of money, it's hard to say you're innocent when you pay that much money. Although Bill O'Reilly makes a good point, because it's a settlement, because it's a legal issue, he can't really comment on it like he wants to, because he would be breaking the law. He'd be breaking the contract. He can't do that. So the New York Times does have an upper hand here, that they can put out all of this stuff, and they know O'Reilly can't really talk about it. And this is kind of a side note, but, you know, even if Bill O'Reilly is guilty, which he might be, I don't know, probably is anyone else uncomfortable with the fact that we have these settlements that are in court? They're contracts to keep this stuff quiet. There's a reason. These are legal binding settlements. And now every time there's a settlement, it seems to be exposed in the media for everyone to see. I don't know. So there's something that seems wrong with that. I know.
So in other words, if there's a settlement, it should be hush hush. No one should know about it, right?
Well, I mean, isn't that the purpose of the settlement?
Well, yeah.
I don't know.
It's buying off your accuser, basically.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody has their price.
I don't know. It just seems weird to me that we're going down this road where we have these legally binding contracts, and then the media story picks it up, and now they're all over the place. And they do it basically because they don't like O'Reilly. Mm-hmm. But, you know, this headline got me thinking, because it says Harvey Weinstein and Bill O'Reilly are proxies in a media war between NBC and Fox News. I do believe they're proxies in a war, but I don't believe they're proxies in necessarily a media war between those two outlets. Now, before I get to my point on that, there was another thing that got me thinking on this. Trevor Noah, who's on The Daily Show, who obviously doesn't like Bill O'Reilly, obviously doesn't like Fox News, obviously is way on the left. I've disagreed with him many times in this show. He came out with like a 4-minute monologue on Fox News and criticizing Fox News over the Bill O'Reilly thing versus the Harvey Weinstein thing. Now, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I have a little bit of the end of that monologue who did the audio here. Tom Benson, go ahead and play that for me.
So listen, does liberal Hollywood have a problem with sexual predators? Yes. Does conservative Fox News have the same problem? Yes. That's my issue with this. It's not supposed to be partisan, because everyone has an issue. Wall Street, Silicon Valley, construction sites, basically every place that has men. And Fox was right to call it out, not because they can score political points, but because it's the right thing to do. So Fox News, please keep going after sexual harassers. I applaud you. And the great news is you don't even have to leave the building.
So I actually agree with some of what Trevor Noah was saying there. And I talked about it on my show like a week ago, that he's right that really this shouldn't be a partisan issue, because it has nothing to do really with politics. Yet it just seemed to me, and if you listen to the whole thing, it's there, that Trevor Noah couldn't wait to somehow make all of this about bashing Fox News. So he's upset because Fox News was all about bashing Harvey Weinstein. If you watched Fox News the last month, they've been so focused on that. Tucker, Hannity, all of them have been criticizing Harvey Weinstein, saying, this is what the left in Hollywood are like. Look what they were hiding. And a lot of that criticism was valid, because they were hiding it. It's not, But then Fox News, he says, was hiding the Bill O'Reilly thing. And I just noticed, has anyone else noticed how even this now has gotten partisan and political? You know, Trevor Noah says, well, it shouldn't be partisan and political, but he kind of makes it partisan and political himself in his little monologue because he somehow made this an opportunity to criticize Fox News. And see, that's what really fascinates me about all of this, is I think part of the reason why the New York Times came out with the story when they did is because it was see, the right does it too, and the right's even worse. So you have Harvey Weinstein, well, first you had Roger Ailes and Fox News, and all those sexual harassment allegations. And then the left says, this is the culture of the right and Fox News. Look how bad they were. You shouldn't watch them. So then the Harvey Weinstein thing comes out. And then Fox News goes, this is the culture of Hollywood and the left. And you shouldn't watch NBC because they're hiding sexual harassment. And then the New York Times comes out and they say, with the Bill O'Reilly thing, and they say, see, the right is just as bad at it too. And you notice what we're doing now? We're just pointing fingers at each other. Mm-hmm. So you have stories of sexual harassment that Trevor Noah was right there. It's obviously a problem beyond, politics. It's in every part of the workplace and everything else. Happens everywhere. Yet it just seems to me, and this just shows where our divide is in this country. Kind of a theme I talk about a lot, that we are so divided on politics and everything in today's world that even a story like this, so you can sense that that's what's going on here. That, they're worse. Oh, well, they're worse. Look at O'Reilly. Look at Harvey Weinstein. I'm better. And it's like, really?
So you're saying that the harassment issue is a proxy fight between the left and the right.
Exactly right. This headline says it's a proxy between NBC and Fox News. No, I don't think it is. Well, it probably is a little bit. But what I'm saying is, looking at the bigger picture, I'm a big picture guy. Looking at the bigger picture, there is no doubt in my mind that this O'Reilly-Weinstein thing has become a proxy fight between the left and the right. And it's something that really shouldn't be. And we did the same thing, and it happened when all this happened. We did the same thing with Trump and Clinton. So you had half the people say, "Look at Trump. He had that video. He's a part of this." And then, well, what about the Clintons? They're bad. And it's kind of like the groupthink is fascinating to me, and it's just not how I think. When the Harvey Weinstein thing came out, I mean, yes, there's a part of me that says, yeah, there might be a problem in Hollywood here. But I didn't think of it politically. I didn't think of it as this is the left. Maybe I should. I don't know. But I just noticed that I'm just tired of this groupthink proxy fights over issues that, like, this isn't really a political thing. But you can sense it. You could sense it with Trevor Noah. You could sense it with all of this stuff because he blames Fox News for not talking about O'Reilly. But NBC didn't want to talk about Weinstein. Saturday Night Live took them a while to come up with that. Hollywood's been hiding this for years. So this is something that's been happening on both sides. And yet somehow we've made it a big political issue. The divide in this country over politics is a little beyond reason, in my opinion. Just fascinates me. Do you guys agree or disagree? 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. So there's another divide going on, and that is the divide in the Republican Party, I guess, even though I think a lot of it's a little overblown. So we're going to talk about that. And I have a poll talking about the divide in the country. I have a poll on that as well that you're going to find very interesting. We're going to get to that next and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You want to listen to Beyond Reason Radio live on your smartphone? Download the Beyond Reason Radio app now. Available in the Google Play or Apple App Stores. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
So there's a new poll out there that you're all going to find fascinating, dealing with the political divide and just the divide in the culture in this country. Divide based on perceptions. It was a poll done by NPR, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and the Harvard School of Public Health. It was taken over the span of 4 months and includes responses from more than 3,400 people across the country. This is what it found. It found that a majority of those in each of 6 different race and sexual orientation categories say that people in their groups are discriminated against. That's right, we all think we're a victim. Interesting. This is what happens when identity politics rules the day. So this is what it finds. It says it includes blacks. 92% of blacks say they're discriminated against. That's an astounding number. LGBTQ people, 90% say they're discriminated against. Latinos, 78%. Native Americans, 75%, Asians, 61%, and whites, 55%. So even whites, most of whites think they're discriminated against. So all these different groups are being discriminated against. Apparently, they feel that way in the United States of America. Now, do I think that most of these people are really being discriminated against? No, I don't. In today's America, no. But it's fascinating to me that in a time when America has actually gotten way better in these areas, you still have the majority of people in all races and sexual orientation believe they're being discriminated against.
Well, one thing it doesn't go into, at least you haven't mentioned it, is the fact that they don't identify what the discrimination is. For example, for white people, it could be age discrimination versus, anything else.
Well, I think it when they're talking about discriminated against based on their race.
Oh, okay.
So that part of the survey is saying that they're being discriminated against because of their race, because of what they are. So every race is apparently being discriminated against by somebody. Now, like I said, I don't think this is true.
Yeah, some worse than others. More so than others.
Yeah, well, but I think this is what happens in the world where identity politics and the division based on this rules. Mm-hmm. So you have divide and conquer strategy. I've been talking about that for a long time, where politicians or interest groups or whatever get involved in all this stuff. They go to these different groups, no matter what they are, and they tell them they're a victim. It's more of this group. I keep talking about this, the group mentality where we define ourselves by our group, and then we get in our groups and then we say, well, we're a victim of everyone else. When the fact is, I don't think any of these people are really victims. Not in this country, not in 2017. I really don't. I don't think most people in this world even know. Most people in America, really understand true oppression, true discrimination, like other parts of the world. But they found even more interesting stuff. It goes beyond race. It says the Public Religion Research Institute asked religious groups if they felt discriminated against and found that 57% of white evangelicals believe that Christians are discriminated against in the U.S. Overall, 66% of Americans say Muslims face discrimination. So now all of our religions are discriminated against. And I've kind of seen this with Christianity. I've talked about it. But it's amazing how it seems like all religions feel like they're discriminated against. And then you have then you go to gender. 57% of women say the country hasn't done enough to ensure equal rights for women. That's according to Pew Research. So women are discriminated against. Majority of them think so. A similar percentage of smokers, 56%, say they are discriminated against, at least occasionally.
Yes, you have to sit outside.
So, this list just keeps going and going and going.
Sure.
No wonder we can't get along. No wonder our divide in politics and on social media and anger, and you can feel it, because we all just feel like we're victims. All of us. We've all gone to our groups, and then we say we're all victims. Well, none of us are victims, really. In this country, not really. There are some, but not on this level that it's saying.
Back in when I was growing up, back in the day, you would get the answer to something like this would be, "You're having a pity party. Move on. Get over it."
But it seems like we're going in the opposite direction, doesn't it?
Exactly.
So here's another thing that it found. So there was one study that I found all this in Investors Business Daily. They found a bunch of studies on different things. One study, they said, found that men's chances of working in a high-status job increased 12% and their earnings climb an average of $1,600 for each 2.5 inches of extra height. Mm-hmm. Another study found that men's future wages could be linked to their height at age 16. So heightism is now a thing. Now short people are discriminated against.
Of course.
Is what the message of that is.
You ever hear of SGS?
No, what is that? What I'm afraid to ask. What is
short guy syndrome?
Short guy. Oh, okay. There's a terrible disease. It's a short guy syndrome. It says, want more evidence of rampant heightism? Fewer than 3% of CEOs are short, while 90% are above average height. So, like I said, short discrimination. It's interesting, though. The end of this piece on Investors Business Daily I found says, there's no doubt that discrimination exists. When in the history of mankind has it not? But America was founded on the idea of the primacy of the individual, and that government policies would aim to protect the rights of individuals, not groups. And unfortunately, that's not the times we're in. We all define ourselves by our group, not as individuals. The problem with identity politics is that it moves the country in the opposite direction, fueling resentment and mistrust, forcing stricter conformity within groups and creating an insatiable demand for special treatment based on membership to one of those groups. It's a dead-end road, which is perhaps why the nation's motto, E pluribus unum, is E pluribus unum and not the other way around. So you have the story. I always talk about the divide in this country over politics. And now you have the statistics that show it seems like most people in this country feel like they are a part of a group that is discriminated against. And I agree with this article that I think a lot of this has to do with the identity politics. We have fallen into the trap that they are making for us, where they're telling you you're a victim because you're a part of your group, but you're really not. We need to get out of the mindset, I think, and look at the individual, which is what this country was founded on. So I found that pretty interesting. I wanted to share that with you. Okay, we're going to move on now to another division that's going on, and that's in the Republican Party. And there's some reaction to that, but Jeff Flake is not happy with President Trump. Gee, I wonder why. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You know what's beyond reason? Yaffee is now on YouTube. Go to YouTube now and just search Beyond Reason Radio. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio, and as it said, I am your host, Michael Yaffee. We're on until 10 p.m. tonight, right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. You're going to want to stay with me in the next hour. At the top of the next hour, we're going to talk with guest Raheel Raza, who's going to talk about, he's a founding member of the Muslim Reformer movement, and he wants to talk about the problem with Islamist supremacy that exists in the world. So there's a lot of talk about, you know, the KKK and white supremacists, but he thinks there's a bigger danger with Islamist supremacists around the world, and they're not being challenged enough. The topic intrigued me, so we're going to get to that in the next hour. But there has been some controversy going on in the Republican Party with, of course, President Trump, as usual.
Really? I hadn't noticed.
Yeah, I know. So yesterday, as you all know, there's been news. Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, decided he is not going to run again. He's not going to run, and then made a big speech about why it all has to do with Trump and how bad Trump is and how bad we are if we support Trump and yada, yada, yada. I have some of his speech here that he made to the Senate yesterday. I don't necessarily disagree with everything Jeff Flake is saying. The problem is he doesn't get the big picture. Well, for one, I mean, he acts like, he's really doing this to stand on his high horse. He's not going again because he's standing on his principles. No, I think you're not running again because you knew you were going to lose. In fact, early polls were showing that he had a very good chance of losing to Kelly Ward in the next primary. So because of that, he's just not going to run. I have a feeling he just came out with a book that had a lot of anti-Trump stuff in it. I have a feeling he's trying to get a gig as like the token Republican for like CNN or something. So he knows that coming out now and really being against Trump, and one of these CNN or MSNBC or ABC could pick him up as some kind of political contributor, because of what he was saying, because they all love him now, of course, because he talked against President Trump. But I wanted to play some of his speech here and go over a little bit of what he said and my reaction to it. And we'll get your reaction to it as well if you want to call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680. And here is Jeff Flake yesterday.
At a moment when it seems that our democracy is more defined by our discord and our dysfunction than by our own values and principles, let me begin by noting a somewhat obvious point, that these offices that we hold are not ours indefinitely. We're not here simply to mark time. Sustained incumbency is certainly not the point of seeking office, and there are times when we must risk our careers in favor of our principles.
Okay, stop right there. For one, I agree with him that your goal shouldn't be to stay in office forever. But you're not really risking your career to sustain your principles because you're quitting. Mm-hmm. That's not really risking your career. If you wanted to risk your career to sustain your principles, you would stay in it, right? But he knows he's going to lose, so he's quitting. All right, continue on.
Now is such a time. It must also be said that I rise today with no small measure of regret. Regret because of the state of our disunion. Regret because of the disrepair and destructiveness of our politics. Regret because of the indecency of our discourse. Regret because of the coarseness of our leadership. Regret for the compromise of our moral authority. And by our, I mean all of our, complicity in this alarming and dangerous state of affairs.
Okay, stop right there. So, and this is the theme throughout his speech, I don't necessarily disagree with him that I have a lot of problems with the lack of civility in politics, some of the nastiness, some of the personal attacks. These are stuff I've talked about. But, I was critical of Trump during the primaries, but he won the election. And when he won the election, I didn't think he was going to win. When he won, I had to take a step back and do a little self-reflection. And instead of just bashing the voters, instead of just bashing Trump or whatever, as everyone's just dumb, I took a step back and I tried to think, why did this happen? Why did Trump get elected? And see, this is something that I feel like the people like Jeff Flake or Bob Corker, they're not. More Jeff Flake than anyone. Bob Corker actually originally supported Trump, so he's kind of going against him now. He's more against him over Trump's take on North Korea, which is one thing I actually support Trump on. But Jeff Flake is he's doing this high and mighty approach, and it's like maybe you should humble yourself a little bit, Mr. Flake, and ask yourself why the people voted for Trump, why Trump won the primary, why he won the election, and why they're not supporting you. Is it all that they're just a bunch of dunderheads who are stupid and don't understand what politics should be or uncivil? Or is it something bigger than that you're just not getting? Because this is stuff I had to ask myself. And I'm going to get to that in a sec, but Jeff Flake continues on here with his speech.
Time for our complicity and our accommodation of the unacceptable to end. In this century, a new phrase has entered the language to describe the accommodation of a new and undesirable order, that phrase being the new normal. But we must never adjust to the present coarseness of our national dialogue with the tone set at the top. We must never regard as normal the regular and casual undermining of our democratic norms and ideals. We must never meekly accept the daily sundering of our country. The personal attacks,
okay,
the threats
stop.
Against...
Before he gets into that, stop right there. So he basically is blaming Trump for the tone of politics in our country. And Trump does bear some of the responsibility, but I've never saw Trump as the cause of all this. I've always saw Trump as the effect. And what I mean by that is Trump is a reflection of where the country as a whole is in terms of the political divide. So blaming Trump for all of this, I just don't buy it. I can understand criticizing Trump for some of his demeanor. I do it all the time. But once again, and I'm going to try to answer this in a little bit, why? Because the people know. If you look at polls and everything, even people that voted for Trump don't really like his lack of civility, his personal attacks, his approach sometimes. So why did they vote for him? Why were the people willing to still vote for him? What was the reason? Jeff Flake doesn't really address any of this. He's just saying, well, I'm standing up for my principles against Trump. Well, you're missing the big picture, I think. And I'm going to tell you that in a sec, but continue on with Jeff Flake, Tom Benson.
Principles, freedoms, and institution, the flagrant disregard for truth and decency, the reckless provocations, most often for the pettiest and most personal reasons, reasons having nothing whatsoever to do with the fortunes of the people that we have been elected to serve. None of these appalling features of our current politics should ever be regarded as normal. We must never allow ourselves to lapse into thinking that that is just the way things are now. If we simply become inured to this condition, thinking that it is just politics as usual, then heaven help us. Without fear of the consequences and without consideration of the rules of what is politically safe or palatable, we must stop pretending that the degradation of our politics and the conduct of some in our executive branch are normal. They are not normal. Reckless, outrageous, and undignified behavior has become excused and countenanced as telling it like it is, when it is actually just reckless, outrageous, and undignified.
All right, so I actually kind of agree with some of the last points he said, but I just got a texter who came in, and he makes the point that I want to make. He says, rhinos hate Trump because they don't want Washington to be fixed. People liked and voted for Trump because he's not Washington. He's real. Washington needs a good kick in the butt, and that's basically why they supported him. I think the texter is right there. See, Jeff Flake doesn't understand that, yes, Mr. Flake might have been civil and might have had a calmer discord when he was in Washington. But the Republicans were not getting things done that the people who put them there wanted to get done. That's why they put Trump in there, because Trump was an outsider. I heard that all the time during the primary. He's not a politician. He's an outsider. He can't be bought. They wanted someone to get in there who actually might get some things done, because they weren't getting it done. You know, Jeff Flake is big on open borders and stuff, and that was something the Republican voters wanted to get done. They wanted secure borders. They wanted to repeal Obamacare. They wanted to let loose the economy and tax cuts and all that stuff, and I guess Flake kind of supports tax cuts. They want to cut spending, but people like Flake in the Senate were not getting the stuff done. They were not really standing up for these things. So Mr. Flake's up there, and he's kind of blaming the voters and blaming the Trump for the discord in this country. Maybe you should look in the mirror a little bit and think, you know, maybe I'm partly responsible here, because we had a job to do in Washington, and instead we were playing politics. We were doing the same old game while the debt went up, while healthcare prices went up, while businesses became more and more overregulated, while our national security seemed to be undermined, and people wanted to change.
One of the things I heard during the campaign often was, if Trump does half the things he says he's going to do, we're better off.
Well, exactly. And it's kind of, there was an article that Bud talked about that I actually shared with them, I think a couple weeks ago, where, the Christian right, evangelicals in this country are kind of uncomfortable probably with a lot of Trump's demeanor as well, just like Jeff Flake is. But then they look at Trump's policies dealing with religious freedom and so forth, and he's getting stuff done that they've wanted. And so they're going to vote for him because he's getting the stuff done. And that's what people like Mr. Flake don't understand.
Pay less attention to what he says and more attention to what he does.
But pay attention to what you're doing. You're standing on your high horse acting like you're Mr. Civility and protecting the country and fighting for freedom, which is fine, except you didn't get anything done while you were in there. Maybe take a step back and say, there's a reason why the people voted for him. I'm going to look and say, I don't like his approach. I don't like everything he's doing. I think this is a mistake, but at least admit that maybe it's partly your fault. And I'm going to play some audio from two people who definitely did not like Trump during the campaign. Yet they're coming out and they're saying, look, I'm going to work with him. He's the president. He was voted by the people. People wanted him in there for a certain reason. And they took a step back and they took that approach instead of taking this high and mighty, Trump supporters are stupid, he's ruining the country, yada, yada, yada. I don't necessarily disagree with everything Flake said. I don't like a lot of what Trump's approach is. A lot of it's just a distraction. But I think he needs to look in the mirror as well. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. I'm going to play those voices of reason next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Subscribe to the Beyond Reason podcast today on your Stitcher app and hear the voice of reason anytime. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Orlando Smart Talk Radio, Beyond Reason Radio. We're on until 10 p.m. tonight, but if you miss any of the show, no worries. Just catch the podcast on iHeartRadio or iTunes or anywhere podcasts are available. So we've been talking about the little bit of a divide in the Republican Party. Although Trump says there's not really much of a divide. Everyone gets along except for a couple of people. What did he tweet out? He tweeted out yesterday. He said, the meeting with Republican senators, this is Trump's tweet. The meeting with Republican senators yesterday outside of Flake and Corker was a love fest with standing ovations and great ideas for the USA. So according to Trump, everything is fine. I think it probably was okay other than those two. Probably McCain doesn't like Trump either. But so you're talking about Flake criticizing Trump, Corker criticizing Trump. McCain is another one who's really been criticizing Trump.
I think the McCain criticism is more personal than anything else.
Well, and see, that brings up a good point. Because I happened to catch this audio of Rand Paul this morning. And he was asked about this. He was asked about the divide, what Flake said, and everything else. Now, if you remember the primaries, wasn't that long ago. But Rand Paul, it seems like forever ago, Rand Paul was not a fan of Trump back then.
He was a candidate.
Well, he was a candidate, yes. But he was interviewed about Trump, too, and he said Trump's not a conservative. This idea that he's a conservative and conservatives like him is not good and yada, yada, yada. He's not for limited government. He heavily criticized Trump. And yet now he's been kind of working with Trump. And he talks a little bit about that. And his approach, I think, is a smart approach. And he talks about why there is this divide in the Republican Party. And it's not really based on policy. It's based on what you said. It's personal. And here's what Rand Paul said about that this morning.
I have a different take on this. I try to keep it more about policy. And look, I've been willing to go and stand toe-to-toe with the president when I disagreed with him on policy. But I also am willing to support the president when I agree with him on policy, like on cutting taxes. I think the president's one of the boldest people we've had in the White House in a long time on cutting taxes, and I'm going to support him there. It doesn't mean I'll always support him, but I try not to make it about personalities or, someone saying someone has less of a perfect character than they do. That's a little little bit of the pot calling the kettle black is that we tend to think, oh, somehow, I'm so perfect that I can criticize another person's character. One of the things the media's missed on all this, they keep saying, well, Senator so-and-so is a conservative. Why is there such a disagreement? Well, because we've made this about personalities and less about policy. I think if we can stay on policy, look, I have had honest disagreements with the president, and yet I'm still on very good terms with the president because I treat the person and the office with respect. But I also am willing to go toe-to-toe if there's a policy disagreement. But I think we really need to be concentrating, and people need to not forget that people elected us because we supposedly were for repealing Obamacare, which didn't work out, and we're supposedly for lower taxes. So I'm all in on cutting taxes, making taxes lower, and I'm going to work with the president on it, and I'm going to try to avoid any kind of ancillary things that I think really are less important than the policy.
So I agree with him there. That really is what politics should be. If you want disagreements, disagree on policy. But the fact is we made this all personal. Now, that being said, Trump is guilty of that as well, if we're going to be honest with ourselves. If we're going to talk about we need to focus on policy, I hope Rand Paul is, direct that towards Flake, McCain, and all that. But Trump's guilty of the same thing. But I think he's right. Yeah, have disagreements over policy, but be on good terms. I think his approach is pretty smart, but Trump is not without his criticism there. He's just not. He's made things very personal, and I've disagreed with him on that. My approach to President Trump has always been praise him when I agree with him, criticize him when I don't. I think that's a pretty smart approach. Now, Lindsey Graham was actually asked about this as well, and he kind of had a little funny comment on this. I wanted to play it real quick. Here it is.
No, I think Jeff Flake and Bob Corker will do what they think is best for the country. They're going to be invaluable on immigration. I'm working with Jeff right now to find a fix to a broken immigration system. I think both of them are going to support healthy tax cuts. Both of them support repealing and replacing Obamacare with Graham Cassidy, a state block grant. I think they're going to be with the president and rebuilding the military. So the one thing I would say to both of these of my colleagues, I admire you, I like you, you've got guts. To the president, you won, you beat me, I want you to be successful. To all three of you, knock it off.
I kind of agree with him. It's like, he's like, look, yeah, I like you senators. Yes, Trump, you beat me. How about we all knock it off and get some stuff done? For once, and this doesn't happen very often. In fact, I don't know if it's ever happened on this show before, but Lindsey Graham was kind of a voice of reason there. But we know this isn't going to happen because everything has gotten personal now. And part of that, frankly, just being honest, I think is Trump's fault because he tends to do that. He tends to make, he called a Flake little Flake, or was it Little Corker, one of those. And he spelled it Liddle. Come on now. But you have to admit, Trump doesn't always hold a grudge. He'll get over it, just like he has with Rand Paul in the past. So, all right, we have a special guest coming up in the next hour talking about the problem with Islamist supremacy and wants to reform Islam in the world. So we'll get his take on that. I was very intrigued by this, so we'll see what he has to say and much more to get to in the show. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. One more hour to go. We'll be right back.
But nothing comes from indifference. I look inside of myself.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I want to get straight into this hour because we have a special guest here on Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. By the way, we're on until 10 p.m. We're talking with Raheel Raza, who is with she's a Clarion Project Advisory Board member and the founding member of the Muslim Reformer Movement. And she has been big on international human rights and the threat posed by Islamist supremacy, mostly in the world. And there's been a lot of talk about white supremacists and the KKK and all that stuff, but she wants to talk more about what she thinks is a bigger threat in the world, and that's Islamist supremacists. And so I wanted to bring her on. And how are you doing tonight, Raheel?
I'm very well, thank you.
So first, talk a little bit about the Muslim Reformer movement. What is that all about?
Well, the Muslim Reform Movement is a gathering of reform-minded Muslims, progressive liberal Muslims across the Western world. And about 2 years ago, we decided that it wasn't enough that we were all individually trying to put out fires or to give an alternate narrative and to try and, overtalk the narrative of the extremists. I mean, those people who are involved in this Muslim Reform Movement are all activists who have been speaking out against the horrors of radicalization for over 10 years now. And we felt that it was important to come together and to actually have a document and a vision. So we met in Washington for 2 days, 2 nights. We brainstormed. We have 2 imams on board with us. And there were people from America, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Europe. And we formulated a vision and a mission statement, which is on our website, which is www.muslimreformmovement.org. And the idea of the reform movement is to bring Muslims into the 21st century, is to live by liberal values of democracy, of tolerance, of pluralism, respect for everyone, whether they are believers or non-believers, gender equality, all the values of the West that we have come here for, the values that we appreciate, the free speech, which is a very important value. And so we put it all together in this one document, and we are part of this movement, and it's growing.
And so why does it seem so hard to have this reform done in especially places like the Middle East? Why is it so hard to have them reform?
Well, it's hard because they are not looking at reform. So the people who are Islamists, which is political Islam, so I think perhaps the first important thing I should differentiate between Islam as a faith like Judaism and Christianity and Islamism as a political ideology,
right,
as the politicization of the faith. So those who are Islamists are not interested in reform. They want to go back to the 7th century, to the caliphate, to all the issues that happened at that time. They are not looking for modernity. They look upon reform and modernity as something evil, as something negative. And that is why they hate the West, and that is why they're at war with the West.
And they're really at war. I was just going to say, a lot of this started in their own countries where they were against their own leaders who were trying to modernize and westernize. Isn't that right?
Well, that's true. Till about 40 years ago when, from the sands of Saudi Arabia on the backs of billions of petrodollars, there was what is known as Wahhabism, which is also an ideology, Wahhabi Salafism. And that has been exported to the West. And then from Iran, the concept of Khomeiniism has been exported. And essentially there is a war between the Shias of Iran and the Sunnis of Saudi Arabia. And the turf war, or the collateral damage, unfortunately, is taking place in between. It's a war not in physical terms, but it's a war of ideas. It's for power, hegemony, control. It's all about politics and power. And they want to implement their way of thinking, their ideology, not only upon other Muslims, but non-Muslims as well. And what many people don't know is that more Muslims have been targets of extremists and terrorists than non-Muslims, because they don't want anyone to think differently. They want everyone to follow their way of thinking, and that's what they are really hung up on. So they don't appreciate the idea of reform. Why would they want reform? Reform means that we want to live in peace with our fellow co-religionists. Reform means we want to give women equal rights. Reform means that we want to respect people from the LGBTQ community. And none of these ideas or values are of interest to them. These are all things that they are against.
So, how do we get them to reform then if they're not interested?
Well, it has to start at the. Well, let me put it to you this way: it took 500 years for the Christian reform. It's going to be celebrated this year. It's not something that happened overnight.
Yeah.
Somewhere, someone has to plant the seeds of change. The word has to come up. The work has to start. And what we believe that we are doing is we are planting those seeds of change. I don't promise at all that the reform is going to come, perhaps even in my lifetime, but at least our future generations will benefit from the idea that there was an alternate narrative, and there are slowly changes coming. There are 5 or 6 women-led mosques now in the Western world. Saudi Arabia, surprisingly, of all the countries, has just said that they want to implement a moderate kind of Islam. Now, how they're going to do this, I don't know, but at least they're talking about it. So the first thing is to find that there's little smattering of conversation going on. Change is coming. In Tunisia, Muslim women are now allowed to marry non-Muslim men. This is totally against the Sharia laws of that country, but it's a huge breakthrough.
Wow. I had no idea that was going on in Tunisia.
Yes. In Morocco, women have helped change the polygamy laws. And so, these are the places where the change is coming, and I'm glad to say that a lot of it is being spearheaded by women.
So it seems like you have a lot of hope then for the future.
Well, I wouldn't say a lot, but I'm an eternal optimist. I wouldn't do this work if I wasn't optimistic.
Right.
I think change takes time, and there comes a point when we just get so heavily taken in by what the extremists are doing that we have no choice but to turn the clock back, to turn the tide, because our future generations are fed up of this daily terrorist acts, and they want to be able to be proud Muslims, but a different kind of understanding of the faith, one that, as I said, is pluralistic and compassionate and merciful and, tolerant. And so we have to start bringing about these changes very slowly, but we need to light a fire under the feet of our religious leadership. And this is where the Clarion Project and the work they do is so important, because their mandate, like ours, is to expose the dangers of radical Islam and give voice to human rights activists, to progressive liberal Muslims, to the people who the masses don't hear about.
So we are talking with Raheel Raza, who's with the Muslim Reformer Movement. You know, Raheel, there's been a lot of talk lately about white supremacists after what happened in Charlottesville and how they should be condemned. And I agree, of course they should be condemned. But you have been pointing out lately that while we're condemning white supremacists, we have not been condemning Islamist supremacy enough in the world. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, when I spoke to you about trying to bring about the reform and change, we are sidelined by those I call the regressive left and those people, who will not, through political correctness, condemn Islamist supremacy the same way in which they condemn white supremacy. Now, whenever there have been ills in society, whenever there has been something negative in Western society, xenophobia, homophobia, racism, bigotry, hatred, everybody comes together to condemn it. It's taught in schools that you must not be racist, you must not be bigoted. I mean, this becomes part of the culture, is that we teach people that this is wrong because it's negative, because it's evil. Now, Islamist supremacy is not only evil, but it causes violence and death. But the same kind of understanding and conversation doesn't take place around the issue of Islamist supremacy. In fact, thanks to 8 years of the Obama administration, people are afraid to use the word Islamist ideology in the same sentence because they'll be called racist. And the backs have been put up against a wall. And for us as Muslims, as practicing observant Muslims who are the frontline sort of, so to speak, warriors in this battle for the soul of Islam, it's very hard when we get slammed from both sides, the extreme right and the extreme left. What we need is a balanced conversation, and especially in the United States, I see when people are so politically polarized, it doesn't matter how they vote. Islamism and radical Islamist ideology is something that impacts everyone. It affects everyone. And so everyone should come together to speak out against it so that we can find a solution. But if we can't even pinpoint the virus, and it is a virus, how are we ever going to find a cure for it? A doctor will tell you that if there's a virus, it needs to be diagnosed, it needs to be isolated, and then you have to find a cure for it. We're at the level where we can't even diagnose the problem, leave alone find a cure for it. And so the extremists and the terrorists have felt very emboldened and very empowered because they pretty much feel they can do whatever they want.
So you addressed this a little bit, but do you feel like our leaders here and maybe in Europe, our political leaders are not doing enough in speaking out against this?
Yes, I do feel that because
even with the newer Trump administration.
Well, the new Trump administration has certainly taken the issue head on, and they have named the problem. And I will be the first one to say that I was invited to give testimony to the U.S. Congress in July, and I spoke to the issue of homegrown terrorism, and I gave them my advice and my recommendations. And this is something that would never have happened under any other administration. So yes, there's definitely a change, and I definitely believe that, the issue has been addressed. But the rest of the Western world, look at what has happened in Europe. Europe is sort of gone down a deep, dark hole because their law enforcement can't deal with the issue. I've been to Europe on an educational trip, and in Sweden, I was shocked to find out that the police officers would rather resign than go into the areas where they believe that there might be extremists or Islamists.
Really?
So
why? Just because they're afraid?
Well, they're afraid, and they haven't been given the kind of support. They've been told that they have to be very careful and very conscious. And this has happened over and over again, where arrests are not made at the right time, where the issues are sidelined. So it hasn't been dealt with head on as a serious problem. Now, it's the same issue across the board in the Western world. If the leaders of these places, these countries, came together, they need to share intelligence. They need to share policies. They need to share how they are going to deal with this problem. But I haven't seen that happen, so I think that it's going to take time.
Well, it sounds like political correctness is kind of taking over.
Yes.
And
correctness is taken over, of course.
Yeah. And, I talk a lot about how in fighting, the war on terror, it's really a war of ideas more than anything else. And we're not really fighting it like a war of ideas. We fight it kind of like a law enforcement thing. And it seems like you agree with that. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. You nailed it when you said it's a war of ideas. We have been saying this since 9/11. No one is born a terrorist. They are radicalized. Someone teaches them how to become a terrorist. So we have to go to the root cause. Where is the hate being taught? Where is the radicalization coming from? Every time there is an attack, you have these, political pundits who come on and talk about the lone wolf and talk about, dysfunctional childhood and maybe he was bullied. It's none of this. Somebody has brainwashed that person. And has created so much hate for the other, because it's only if you hate another that you can harm them. And this is where the dialogue needs to change, the conversation needs to change. And again, at the Muslim Reform Movement, we are trying to create an alternate narrative, which has got to stop being a narrative of hate. Wherever we see this happening, we need to speak about it. We need to condemn it. We need to stop it. We need to go to the source of where the funding is coming from. One of the recommendations that I made to Congress is to stop foreign funding from terrorist supporting countries coming into the academic institutions, because all funding obviously comes with an agenda.
Yep. That's exactly right. I really appreciate you spending so much time with us. The last question I really had for you is every time I bring up this subject or I bring on a guest on this subject, I have people out there that tell me, it's not Islamism, it's Islam, that the religion itself is the problem. It's, Muslims, it's all Muslims' fault. The whole religion is bad. How do you address people that say things like that?
Well, first of all, you call them extremely ignorant. They're showing their biases because, I'll tell you very simply, when 1.6 billion Muslims, they are the second largest faith in the face of this earth, were terrorists or extremists, none of you would be around to be having this conversation today. And so that is a very ignorant perspective. Islam is the youngest of the three monotheistic faiths. In fact, the Quran, which is the scripture of Muslims, talks more about the Jews and Christians than it does about, Muslims talks about humanity. It has a universal message, and then it has time-bound messages. So, to tarnish all Muslims with the same brush is, as I said, is a very ignorant thing to do, and all we can do is try and help educate people to differentiate between the faith of Islam, which is just like Judaism and Christianity, well, just like, meaning it is a continuation of the same message, and Islamism, which is a political ideology. So once that is done, then we can actually we can battle the issue. We can go after the problem. But if this is muddled up by tarnishing all Muslims with the same brush, then of course there's no solution. Let's say if people believe that 1.6 billion Muslims are extremists, what are they going to do? Are they going to, excommunicate? I mean, that's not a solution. It's not even a viable thought. So we have to be a little better educated about how we are going to deal with this problem. And I teach a class at a university in Toronto about this, just to educate the masses and help them understand the difference between a faith and a very evil ideology.
Raheel Raza, who is with the Clarion Project and the Muslim Reformer Movement, I really appreciate you coming on with us, and hopefully we'll talk again in the future.
I hope so, too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Very interesting stuff there. It's something I've been talking about forever, the war of ideas, that we're fighting an ideology more than anything else, and we keep trying to pretend we're not, but that's exactly what's happening. And there are Muslims out there who are looking to reform and who are looking to fight that ideology as well, good Muslims, so to speak. So we're going to talk more about this and much more to get to in the show. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffee on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on till 10 p.m. tonight here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA, and catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Make sure to like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. That is, we're on Facebook Live there, or you can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. So, Tom Benson, apparently there's some big news about Trump and a dossier or Clinton's, or
it's been around. Yes,
it's been around.
Yeah.
I don't know if CNN or anybody has been covering it too much. But
if they are, you're not sure of their take on it.
Yeah, this is true. Okay, so obviously we're talking about the fact that the infamous Trump dossier, which BuzzFeed was the one that originally put it out during the election. And it ended up being discredited by a lot of people. A lot of it, had some crazy stuff in it. And we're now finding out, originally it was, the investigation into Trump was funded by some GOP guy. We still don't know. Who do you think the GOP guy was? I wonder if it was like Jeb Bush. Think it was Jeb Bush?
No, it was probably some rich anti-Trumper guy.
Yeah, probably. So, but eventually the Democrats picked it up with Fusion GPS. They started funding that. Then Michael Steele, this British agent, got involved, and the Democrats and the Clinton campaign were funding that. And then somehow they got all this stuff saying that Trump was connected to Russia. Originally, they went to the FBI. The FBI's like, no, I'm not worried. We don't want to deal with this. Then they gave it to McCain. McCain gave it to the FBI, and then the FBI gave it to Trump. And here we are. But the thing, there's still a lot we don't know. It's hard to talk about this completely. I know I should, I guess, because I'm the conservative guy. There's still some things we don't know.
It's a tangled web.
It is. The things we don't know is why was the Clinton campaign trying to hide the fact they fund this so much? Because now they're coming out and they're saying, well, this is just opposition research. Well, it's a normal politics, day-to-day stuff. Opposition research apparently happens all the time where they hire foreign agents to look into presidential candidates. I guess that's a normal thing. Didn't know that.
And that's not colluding or collusion?
Exactly. Well, I mean, when Trump does it, it's collusion.
Oh,
so when Trump Jr.
Yes.
went into opposition research, wanted to find something, that was collusion. And when Hillary Clinton does it, well, it's just the normal day-to-day stuff. But I mean, first we don't know why the Clintons were trying to hide it. That's really the big question. Because they did try to hide this for a long time, that they were the ones funding this. Eventually it came out in, court proceedings. The other thing that we don't know is where Michael Steele got all this information. There's some theories floating around that Michael Steele and the Democrats got this information from the Russians. If that's true, that would mean the Democrats were the ones colluding with Russians, not Trump, not the president. So there's that's out there. There's still a few things we don't know. Of course, the Clintons are going to say this is a non-story. This is a distraction. That's what I've heard today. Oh, well, this is just a distraction from the real investigation.
Yes.
Of course, that's how politics works. And actually, President Trump commented on this. I have the audio up there, Tom Benson, if you can get that ready. Trump was asked about this, and he commented on this, and then he said what you would expect him to say, but here it is.
Don't forget, Hillary Clinton totally denied this. She didn't know anything. She knew nothing. All of a sudden, it found out. What I was amazed at, it's almost $6 million that they paid, and it's totally discredited. It's a total phony. I call it fake news. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful.
So, and he's actually right there. A lot of it was discredited, and the Clintons had their fingerprints all over it. Now, that being said, this really is not, to me anyway, it's not as big of a story as the uranium deal.
Correct.
So the fact that the Clinton Foundation was getting all of this money at the same time the State Department made a deal with the Russians for them to take 20% of the uranium from America and to store it over there, that seems a little bit fishier to me. That's the one that I think the Clintons are probably pretty worried about if more information on that comes out. Now, Hillary Clinton was asked about that, and she said, well, that's been debunked. No, that's debunked. Oh, that's convenient. Yeah.
I think the jury's still out on that.
It's the vast right-wing conspiracy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Tom Benson, you didn't know? I mean, that's proven fact, the vast right-wing conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. It's kind of like, when she originally said the vast right-wing conspiracy and about Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, and yet that actually ended up being true. So this might be another thing where she's saying, oh, well, that's been debunked, but it's probably going to end up being true. So if that happens, it's going to be hard to keep up with the Russia-Trump narrative when they have actual proof that there's a Clinton-Russia narrative that can be thrown out. So there's a few things the Democrats are going to do. They're going to hope that the Mueller investigation really condemns Trump somehow. Or they're just going to move on from the Russia thing and say the whole thing is a distraction.
Let's drop it and move on. Yeah.
Because all of a sudden now we're implicating Hillary.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden they're going to say, yeah, this is a big distraction. Yeah. So there's a lot we still don't know. This doesn't necessarily prove collusion between Hillary and the Russians, but it doesn't not prove it either. So we'll have to find out more information.
And I'm sure it's coming.
Yeah, there's definitely more coming. And it's interesting, too, that the sources they're coming from. So the Hill was the one who brought out the uranium deal thing.
Right.
That was the Hill.
Right.
This was the Washington Post that brought out this story, I believe. So that's, I mean, it's hard to say it's a vast right-wing conspiracy when you have two pretty mainstream, usually liberal publications coming out with this stuff.
I would think the Hill's a little bit more mainstream. I think the Post is not. It's lefty.
Yeah, well, I talked about this before. I think the Hill actually does a pretty good job of staying in the middle.
Yeah.
Actually. They've absolutely, when you go there, I find a lot of great stuff there.
Yeah.
So we'll find out more of what happens next. Now, the other thing that's been talked about, bantied about, is how the Niger situation has Trump's Benghazi.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said before, the Democrats are now admitting that there was a problem with Benghazi.
Yes.
That's all of a sudden, I thought it was a non-story. I thought that was another distraction. Now all of a sudden it's not, because they can implicate Trump in something. So I found a voice of reason on that subject, and we're going to play that in the next segment. And much more to get to. We'll end the show with things that made Yaffee laffy. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeartRadio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
So was the Niger situation, the special ops mission there where unfortunately American servicemen died, is that Trump's Benghazi? That was something Representative Wilson brought out during the whole controversy of the condolence call, which that whole stupid controversy. Oh, did you see, by the way, Tom Benson, let me pull up that story, that there's another Gold Star widow who came out.
Oh, yes.
And said that...
Who's upset with the president when she got her phone call, but she's not talking about Trump. Is that the story you're thinking of?
No, I'm very interested.
Oh, there's another one, yeah.
No, I want to look in it. No, this is someone who says she's a Gold Star widow, Maisha Johnson. No, that's not. That's the one that Trump had a problem with. Gold Star widow Brittany Jacobs came out and said, in reaction to Representative Wilson, said, "That's not the president I know." She said, "Honestly, the president has been nothing but amazing to me and my family. And I think it's sad the way the media, not the media, but per se the way everyone is politicizing it. The president, I think, when he called her, I think he had the best of intentions." This is another Gold Star widow, says, "I feel that no president would call a family member, especially as soon as they lost their loved one, and say, anything that they think would offend them or upset them." She said, "By no means are her feelings wrong, and they're hers, but it's a sad thing that has happened. I think people just need to step back and give the president a chance and see that, what, he was trying to do the right thing. He was trying to support this family and just see the good in it." She said, "I feel like he was trying to be supportive and caring. I feel like it's just been twisted all around. That's not the president that I know and that I have an experience with. He has been so caring to me and my family." So, I don't know. I haven't really watched CNN today, but do you think that was like front page on CNN? Let me go to CNN.com. Let's see if that's up there.
Oh, sure. It's going to be there. Yeah.
Let me see here. Brittany Jacobs. Let's see. No. Oh, here's their headline. "Still no Russia sanctions." So that's CNN's headlines. And you know why there's no Russia sanctions yet? Because of collusion. So, but I don't see anything about that Gold Star widow on here. Very interesting. All right. I don't know what I expected. Okay, but anyway, some people are saying that this is Trump's Benghazi, this whole Niger situation where those servicemen died, and that started the whole controversy. I found some audio here, and this is my voice of reason of this hour. Buck Sexton, who's a former CIA officer, now he has a nationally syndicated radio show, and he's on Fox News a bunch. He was asked about this yesterday on Fox. And first he talked about a little bit of the situation itself and what we need to know and what it was really all about, some truth behind it. And then he talks about why this is not the next Benghazi. Go ahead and play cut one for me of Buck Sexton there, Tom Benson.
Well, there are still some tactical questions that are unanswered. How do they find themselves in this ambush? There have been some changes to the timeline. But quite honestly, from the public and Congress's perspective, I think those have been under less scrutiny than the overall mission, which is why are we there? Which is interesting because the why are we there has been established for a long time. It's been out in the public. Anybody with access to the Internet could have read about U.S. operations in Niger and the broader mission set of U.S. Special Forces training indigenous forces so that they can stand up and fight against Islamic extremists themselves instead of us having to send very large deployments of troops when a country becomes a failed state. That's been an established model for a long time. In fact, that is at the core of what SF, of what U.S. Special Forces does.
So he gave a little bit of perspective on that, saying basically that, yes, the mission went bad. Yes, that's not a good thing, but this is just a normal mission. There's no sense here of anything necessarily nefarious. And so people were saying this is Trump's Benghazi. Buck Sexton responds to that. This is what he said.
Well, when people begin to compare Benghazi to this ambush in Niger, you can see right away that the only similarities are rather superficial. You have both of these occurring on the same continent. You have 4 U.S. killed in both incidents. But in terms of the situation in Benghazi, you had weeks, if not months, of requests for additional assistance. You had 13 hours of not the assistance arriving that those on the ground were calling for. There were a whole lot more political considerations into what was going on during that 13 hours. What happened here in Niger, based on everything we've seen so far, is we have U.S. Special Forces, U.S. Special Operations that are in dangerous places, working with allies, trying to kill jihadists and trying to help our allies get rid of those threats on the battlefield. Sometimes that goes bad. There are moments when things like this kick us all in the gut. This is one of them. But it's not that there was some strategic mishap here. It's not that there's been some effort by the government to hide what happened. They will tell us. The Pentagon will let us know exactly what they can about this. Maybe not everything because of operational security concerns, but this was SF doing their mission in a dangerous place. It went bad, but it's a mission that's going to continue.
So I thought he was a good voice of reason there. He's basically saying, look, this is nothing like Benghazi. There has been no attempt to lie about it. There's been no attempt to hide it like the whole Benghazi situation and distract and say it was caused by something else. There's been no attempt that this operation shouldn't have taken place. There's been operations in that area for a while now. Hasn't got a lot of immediate attention, but they've been happening. And basically it's because you have jihadist movements there. And we're fighting them in Africa. And there's no doubt that they are there. And this was a special operations thing going on.
I found the story on the other Gold Star mother.
Ooh, yes. Share with that.
Her name is, she's from Colorado. Her name is Julie Schrock. And she says when her 23-year-old son was died in Afghanistan, she did not hear from Obama in a phone call. He never reached out. He sent a letter, but the letter, she says, was written by a computer.
Yeah, one of those, yeah.
How does she know that it was written by a computer?
Uh-oh.
She got multiple copies of the same letter.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Of course, we don't hear about that.
Oh, no. Oh, that's not good. Yeah, I don't remember that being a big story when that happened and Obama was in office. I don't remember the press even asking him about it. Or anything.
Yeah.
Do you? They assume he was great. Now, to be honest, I don't think any president is trying to be disrespectful to families of fallen soldiers.
Well, of course not.
I really don't think so. And the fact that that's where we are in this country, that people actually think that Trump was intentionally trying to be disrespectful.
Or anybody would be trying to be disrespectful.
I know. I mean, I just, do they actually believe that? It could have been misinterpreted. Now, when you listen to the interview of the Gold Star widow herself, she was on ABC News, there's no doubt she's upset at the situation. Okay? And she has every right to be. Her husband has just been killed in an operation, and she's upset at the whole situation, and that probably was part of the reason why she got more upset at Trump. Okay? I understand that happens, but there was definitely politicized and thrown way out of proportion by everyone else. And I just...
She was used by the media to get at the president, period.
Yeah, I think you're right. And by Representative Wilson to get at the president.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's exactly right. So, and speaking on the whole mission in Niger where he was killed, I found an interesting piece in the Daily Signal by Stephen Bushi, who served for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and a top Pentagon official and is at the Heritage Foundation now. He had an interesting piece that says the Special Ops mission in Niger was routine and common. Stop politicizing it. He said the mission in Niger, which began in 2013, was a classic special operations operation. The type of operation is called foreign internal defense. He says that's an old school term for the most fundamental tasks we give our Green Berets. A small team of them goes into a foreign country to work with that nation's military to better prepare it to deal with its own problems. This is done during the period the military calls Phase 0, which is prior to when a bigger conflict emerges. It is done in coordination with the host nation's civilian government and the entire country team at the U.S. Embassy, which is led by the U.S. ambassador and supported by the intelligence community station chief. He says this is not a clandestine Hollywood commando mission or a suicide raid. It is overt and open. Its purpose is to build rapport with the host nation military, to improve its capabilities, to gather open source intelligence, and to get to know both the lay of the land and the local players. It says the U.S. has conducted these kinds of missions around the world since the 1950s. At times, we've had a few as a dozen of these operations, at others several hundred, in as many as 80-plus countries simultaneously. Says some might ask why put them at risk. He says the answer is simply that the return is worth it. Often the use of small, mature, and low-profile group of quiet professionals can have greater success than a large, high-profile deployment on a massive scale. So he basically talks about it. It's a pretty long piece, but he talks about how this is something that's been going on for a while. It's something that happens. Yes, it stinks that our servicemen were killed. Yes, we try to prevent that as much as possible. But he says they know that if trouble occurs, support is further away than in conventional operations. Intelligence is superb, often better than in regular military activities, but the logistical and response functions are thin and distant. So that's why we only send professionals on such missions. These are not kids who just joined the military 6 months ago. They are hardened professionals who, yes, know what the risks are and go without hesitation. Says, yes, we need to know what happened in Niger. Anytime military members die in action, a full investigation occurs. The Department of Defense does not need Congress or the media to provoke that. The military is always working to make our troops as safe as accomplishing the mission will allow. A full post-mortem of the deadly ambush in Niger needs to take place so that we can better know what to do the next mission. So that would have happened if no one in Washington had said a word. The media and politicians should stop the showmanship and game playing. Let Defense Secretary James Mattis do his job, and let the brave men and women of the U.S. military do theirs. Grandstanding and talking heads don't make America safe, but missions just like the one in Niger do.
The general the other day, Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he said there's 6,000 troops, troops like that throughout all the countries in Africa right now.
Because the jihadists are there.
Yeah.
They have been there for a little while, and they're trying to grow strength there because they're losing it in other places. But we have special operations there, and there's no doubt this has been politicized. He's exactly right. But I like stories that give perspective on all this, and I thought that did. All right, we're going to end the show with things that made Yaffee laughy. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Well, it's been a jam-packed show. We've gotten into a lot of different things here on Beyond Reason Radio. A lot of politics, of course. We had our special guest at the top of the hour. But we only have a couple of minutes left, so you know what that means. It is time for things that made Yaffee laughy. So, and Tom Menton, you had saw this story too. There's a California restaurant out there.
Oh, yes.
They had this dish. I think it was Sweet Dixie Kitchen is what it's called. And they had this dish where they had some fried chicken.
Uh-huh.
And they'd put it different ways. One of them would put it on some waffles. So they have chicken and waffles.
Sure.
Big Southern dish.
Good stuff with gravy, you bet.
Oh, yeah. But somebody noticed something interesting about the chicken.
Oh, yeah?
It tasted kind of familiar. I was like, I think I've tasted this chicken before. Uh-huh. Turns out that the California restaurant admits that it buys fast food chicken from Popeyes and serves it to its customers.
And marks it up, I'm sure.
Yeah, apparently the restaurant found itself in hot water recently after a customer ordered Pop's chicken. They even call it Pop's.
Yeah.
Like they didn't even try to hide it at this point. I did not realize that until I just read it. They ordered Pop's chicken and waffles at the Sweet Dixie Kitchen in Long Beach, California, and noticed something strange. The chicken they use is from Popeyes, the customer wrote on Yelp. Before my friends and I got seated, we saw them quickly bring in two large boxes of Popeyes to the kitchen. They literally would send out employees.
It's outsourcing.
In the day.
Yeah. It's done all the time.
They go down the street. They buy some Popeyes chicken. And they bring it back, and then they sell it again to the people here with a little, extra stuff on it.
Of course. Little extra spices.
It says, I love it, she said. I can stand behind it. I proudly say this is the best product for the dish. She acknowledged that every day she walks 3 blocks. This is one of the workers there. She walks 3 blocks to the local Popeyes to buy the chicken before reselling it in her restaurant. The chicken is reheated in her oven. Says, we never tried to hide it, which is why I walk through the front door with it.
Oh, gee whiz.
When people order it, I tell them it's not on my menu as Popeye's chicken because I can't get the approval from Popeyes. She says 95% of her food is homemade, so she doesn't understand the uproar.
Well, that's not homemade wherever if you get it from somewhere else.
Well, she says 95% of it, so everything else is homemade.
I see.
Is this legal? Is she allowed to do this?
It's called outsourcing, sure. But she should. Now Popeyes, I'm sure, is going to raise the price for her.
Yeah, man. Somebody posted on Instagram about it, and they put hashtag Popeygate. This is Popeygate now. Good stuff. I mean, I don't know. Are you allowed to do this? I mean, I guess most places get it from food distributors, so they can get the food from there. Can you get your food at Popeyes? I feel like Popeyes is probably not too happy about this, though. Although they're making money off of it. So I don't know. All right. Thank you all for listening to the show. I'm a little hungry now. Is there a Popeyes open this late? Maybe. I think I might want to get some. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. I'll be back on tomorrow night, so catch you guys then.
Oh, well,